Hi everybody, I'm Bill Langley. I'm a ex-Disney staff illustrator. Worked for many clients like Amblin Studios, Universal, Warner Brothers, Hanna-Barbera, Marvel, bunch of. Anyway, over the years, when I started out at Disney, uh, my mentor and instructor was Tom Goldberg in publications. And he told me, he said, first you need to learn how to draw the characters, which I spent many months doing. And he says, not only that, I'm going to teach you how to ink them, because if you can ink and pencil, you're much more in demand for contract work with different studios, publishers, comic books, etc., comic strips, whatever. And I spent probably 9 or 10 months practicing inking, mostly dialogue balloons on comic books that were drawn from our Argentina-based studio that had been doing them for years. They had some excellent drawers and inkers. One of my favorite inkers I used to copy all the time, and when I was doing dialogue balloons, I practiced and tried to learn the best way to create the perfect line, thick and thin line with brushes. Tom told me when I started out that I needed to put a lot of water in your brush, then clean it, but also if you dip it into the ink, um, you need to get a lot of ink on your brush, and then to take that and spin it sideways like this. I'm actually rolling the brush, spinning it so that it chisels a point to the brush, and that point is super thin pinpoint. So that way you can make a really delicate line, and by the pressure of your hand, press down on the tip of the brush and make a thicker line, or a thicker line, go back to thin, go thin, thick, thin, that kind of stroke. So learning to ink over those years, I did 8 or 9 years of contract work while I was on staff at Disney for a lot of different people and art services outside the Disney studios, and I got plenty of practice. But this is the technique based on the inkers of comic books, comic strips that started in the 30s. One of the first licensing contracts Disney ever signed was with Topolino in Italy to do comic books and comic strips. So Topolino means Mickey. They, started that into the business, and through successive artists, inkers, drawers, they moved through the years. Now, what I learned from Tom was how to do this. You're going to have plenty of water in the ink, at least enough to make it thin enough to flow in your brush. This ink is super black Speedball, which I found is the blackest ink you can get. There might be something else out there, but that's what I've found out over the years. It's really the blackest of black ink. And but if it sits and air gets to it, it thickens. So every time you unscrew the cap, you have to add some water to the ink, thin it down, so it'll flow in the brush. And let's see if I've got something here. Now I'm I'm going to spin the brush again like I did before to get a point on this side, and I have a so inking is a technique in pressure with the, you can see the little fine tip on my brush, and I'm just going around and moving the brush, lifting it if I want a thin line, pressing down harder if I want a thicker line, doing all the indications I want to put in to the start of this. And I usually start with the outline of the tree or character, animal, or now if I lift my hand, press down, lift my hand, you can get a really nice thick and thin point or line. That can add some character to your line. But what he taught me about inking, which is practice for decades, is that when you ink a character, or anything really, the top of the character, the top line that defines the character, the top of the hair, the top line over the leg, is thinner than the bottom line. The bottom line will always be a little thicker, heavier, to show that that object has weight. Thinner line on top, thicker line underneath, and you get the illusion of heaviness. So everything you're going to ink, you're going to ink thicker on the bottom and thinner on top. Now, something like that. I'm going to go on and do some more inking. That way you can see how this is being applied. And then every once in a while I have to refinish a point on the brush. If I run out of ink or start running out of ink, I have to dip it into the ink bottle, and start over again. Thin it out. Go chisel a point again on the brush. You get really thin, very thin needle lines for detail work, and thick and thin for the outside, which kind of frames the character or what you're inking. So when I'm doing trees and bushes and logs or anything like that, I'm going to put a pretty thick line underneath, leading to, and I lift the brush up as I go, so I'm pressing down on the point, dragging the brush the direction I want to go, and then lifting it up so it leaves a thick to very thin point character to the line. And that's what you get with brushes. Now a lot of artists today ink with micron pens. There's a Japanese version that's pretty darn good. I do use micron pens. This is an 01, which is pretty thin, delicate. I do use this for detail work, sometimes with shading, where I need to do, and with this, with a pen, it's not flexible, the point is not flexible like a tip of a brush, but if you push down and touch the paper and then lift your hand, you can get that same kind of line from thick to thin point. And that's pretty good with these. You know, a lot of artists for Marvel, DC Comics, etc. today most of the modern inkers ink with these kind of pens. They've never been taught brush line work or the tradition of brush and ink. I think that's kind of sad, because I like also to carry on the tradition that's been done for 70, 80 years. And while I was at Disney, and I did a lot of inking while I was on staff for 10 years, I kind of created a reputation of probably one of the best inkers at the studio. And to this day, I think it's pretty high quality. I can still do this kind of inking quality because I was taught the right way and a technique to accomplish that. So if you become an inker, you have to make a decision whether you want to learn the old way or the new way. And I combine both. When I really need fine lines, I use a micron pen for detail, eyelashes, thin outlines and things like that. So they are handy. I used to do it all with a brush. I used to, in my heyday, like in the 80s and 90s, I did all my inking, even straight lines, with a brush. And I got pretty darn good at it. What you find out is you have the eye, the detail, and the brain to accomplish that, all with a brush. But today, my eyes aren't like they were back in the 80s and 90s, and I need help with bifocals, magnification, and also your hand isn't as steady as it was in your youth. So I don't have a real big problem. Sometimes when I'm inking, I do get a twitch or whatever, and I have to stop, re-ink my brush, start over again. But it doesn't happen too often. I still can do quality work. So this is a series that I'm doing with my own creations, and this is actually based on I was influenced over the years by Frank Frazetta, who was probably the best inker that ever lived. And he had such a beautiful quality to his line work with watercolors, ink, or whatever. And in this situation, kids are swinging around. So I did my own version, my own tree, my own kids. There's a swing in this one, there's not in that. So I thought it was a good concept, but still is today. It's cute. And as I go along, as I finish this, I'll stop and film some of the steps during the finish phase to see it completed. And that's my lesson for today. Thank you very much.